Tu veux rester un tout petit peu avec moi? Je suis prête à t'aider. Je pourrais apporter.
S'il vous plaît.
Hein?
S'il vous plaît, on commence. Là.
Je pourrais apporter ça, mettre ça à la poste. Qu'est-ce que je peux faire? Est-ce qu'on ne peut pas? Tu vois, j'ai... Je suis prête à t'aider.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the launch of Avant Desire. My name is Alana Wilcox, and I'm the editorial director at Coach House Books. And I'd like to start by acknowledging that Coach House, where this book was printed, is on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Before I start our event, I just want to, on a personal note, talk about how important the work of Nicole Broussard has been to me. I first read Mauve Desert in my early 20s, and it changed what I thought a novel could be. I think it changed my life. I think it's why I'm in publishing, why I'm doing the work that I'm doing. So for me, this project is really important as a publishing venture, but also for me personally, just to sort of see the incredible body of work represented in this one document. So I guess I first met Nicole probably in around 2003 when we published the Blue Books. It was one of the first projects I did at Coach House when we wanted to sort of revisit old Coach House books that have been out of print. And those were the first 3 on my list, the 3 we collected in the Blue Books. So since then, it's been a joy to produce 6 more books with Nicole, and then including a reissue of Mauve Desert, and then this. I really couldn't be more honored that Nicole has trusted us with this project. And I have to say that our 3 editors, Sina, Genevieve, and Aaron, it was a tremendous amount of work, but I think they did an absolutely breathtaking job of bringing together just little tastes of all the incredible parts of this absolutely glorious career of Nicole Broussard. So I want to say a quick thank you to Zab, who designed the cover, to Tali, Roman, Yasmin, Crystal, James, and Nick at Coach House, who all did various things, including getting picky permissions and things like that. And I especially want to thank all the contributors, the translators, the publishers, the interviewers, who allowed us to use their work. Some of you are probably here right now. Thank you so much for being a part of this and letting us bring your work into this document. And most especially to thank the 3 editors who really, it was a formidable task to bring all this work together. And they did such an exceptional job of choosing expected and unexpected texts from different times, different spaces, different contexts, and brought it all together, I think, in a way that is absolutely representative of one of the world's finest writers. So I'm going to pass the microphone along to Geneviève, who will introduce Nicole, and we can begin the festivities. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you, Alana. And thank you, everyone, for being here as well. Just before I unmuted my mic, I was wondering how I was going to prendre la parole, because when you're in a live event, they will call you up to the platform where you're supposed to go, and you can kind of breathe on your way there. But here I am, just sitting in my kitchen, dining room, and I guess I've never had an event of this envergure before in my home. So I'm happy to be here with you all. And I'm happy that for this to be around Nicole Brossard's work, who work that has meant a lot to me and a lot to my fellow collaborators. Work that has had us convening in many platforms. And in fact, as Erin and I were discussing, because Erin is in fact in my home at this time, we're 2 fortunate individuals who are in New Brunswick for until midnight tonight when they changed the sanitary restrictions. So we're taking advantage of that. And in any case, so yes, we would meet mostly virtually, in fact, to make selections, to talk about the work, to give each other some feedback, some homework, some things to think about. And Erin reminded me of the fact that we had only, in fact, met 3 times in real life. And one of those times was during the climate manifestation, so the climate crisis, how do you say that? Protest in Montreal, where the roads were in fact blocked. And it was interesting because we did have to take another route to get together, much like tonight, where I think we're taking alternate routes to convene. Nicole will read this evening for about 10 minutes, though we're all so eager and excited to hear you, Nicole, so you can go beyond those 10 minutes if you will. We're all here listening deeply and affectionately with you. And afterwards, we will have a brief discussion. And I'd also like to invite you all who are tuning in and who are very much here with us now to participate. And so if you have a question or an idea, something that you'd like discussed, or just want to make a wager of presence of your own, please do so in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Otherwise, you can use the chat box, but if you want to address all the panelists, you can do so. If you'd like to address all the attendees, you can do so. So there's a way to modulate the intimacy or broadcast of your question. So without further ado, je vous présente une écrivaine très importante, une grande lectrice, grande écrivaine, Nicole Brossard, qu'on écoute ce soir avec grand plaisir. Merci.
Thank you very much, and good evening to everyone. I will not say right now all the good that I think about the book, but later on it will arrive. Donc, I will start with 3 poems from Installation which was published the first time in 1989, and the translation is 2000 by Erin Murray and Robert Mézel. Sight. Each time I settle into a pronoun other than the absolute I remove myself from anxiety, pointing a finger at the changing shape of relations, but the final distress comes from the image far away, a fatal I, delirious in impersonal beauty. Knowledge. My darling, I'm writing, so you'll show me your sex in a fine mood and your accent in my ears and your little gender in my mouth to dream matter and its thresholds, the best arguments and choice partition. I want all your music, your arrière color, and so to understand the world. Encore. It's never enough. Each time you roll hope around in your mouth to appease too many ideas, their opposite lit, a taste for curves and for everywhere at once, with the option of crying out should death and utopia start to collide. From harmonious matter still maneuvers, and the translation is from Caroline Berval. The translation and the text are from 1997. I presume day rises in different points, and since this thought occurs to me in the midst of reality, its unnameable pauses, I do, to bear witness of time, languages mobile, take stock of the notion that nothing is too slow nor too brief for the universe. At this late hour, I know that life can confirm silence, set fire to commendations, trace up circular tears, breathe dust, and I like that it's so, since I've learned to watch July to October, all fires, immerse myself in the strong smell of nakedness, its splendors, mauves, the facade, and peculiar sonnets that gesture across language like we do dreaming at night, not to die without voice. At this late hour, where to name is still a function of the dream of the hope, where poetry splits daybreak from great gushes of daylight, and women will walk a number of times invisible, carnal, into the storylines, I know that all isn't said. Between urban conversation and tradition, it's cold in vertigo. And sometimes in the volatile matter of tears, a peculiar sweat of truth settles as if life could touch its metaphor.
And why is Toko, you want desire?
A new translation from These Our Mothers, just 10 poems, first translated by Barbara Godard, and recently Erin Murray and Robert Mézel translated a series of 10 poems, all of them working with the work on figure. Une figure, just say it. Reality, color, altar, harness. We've seen it all, tied down, held all day, every day, or white sheepdogs in the morning. Reality, it doesn't exist. Try waiting for 5 o'clock. It doesn't exist. It's still light. It's elsewhere. Reality? I don't believe it. Same goes for appearance. It's too expected, but to have access or start again, it doesn't exist. Did you find your utopia in the drawer in mommy's room? It's just a fact of life. Reality is an illusion. White arms in the snow, once and for all, it doesn't exist. Long before I tremble, afraid it just doesn't exist. Or how about at sea, the waves within the fold, the truss? In fact, what's real is the intense body, far from her eyes in the right spot for knowledge. Nothing to do with it, but check out the figure, alert, upright, and in history, in sheep reality. From a Notebook of Roses and Civilization, a translation by Erin Murray and Robert Mezel. Every ardor. Beware of words that blur, of summer heat that unfurls like an ocean over the species. Thus, we leave without remembering verbs in their time that brought us closer to mirrors and rapture. Since immensity seeks to take on another form, imagine the speed of the murmur, the noisy surging of old intentions, this great yes, risen from the depth of memory. Another one, smooth horizon of the verb love. An urban image from the 80s, when we hung out at chez Madame Arthur, and at the back of the room, women wrapped their arms around nights of ink and dawn. Calendar of murmurs, vague caresses about the planet and its water. We could have confused words, but there were doors open, confetti in the midst of darkness, gentle ways to swoon in a corner with she who put her tongue in my mouth. Focus on yes, on the women's eyelids. Caress, not silence, not word. Focus beyond. Hold me back. And I will end with two paragraphs from a text, Lorem Ipsum, and the translation is by Suzanne de Lotbinière Harwood, and this text is from 2018. The present. I must discuss the present. I have long said I am a woman of the present, meaning by this that the present makes me happy and or stimulates my clarity of vision. The present as a source of well-being that brings the joy of extreme presence. And now, so very suddenly, after just a few decades into digital civilization, the present is deleting all prior eras to become all on its own, a bottomless pit of the ephemeral, of consumerism, an invasive means of distraction. And yet, the present is not ephemeral once it vibrates in language. I don't want to be me in a text. I want only the essential of what can make me say I. And to live from this by combining grammar, punctuation, breathing words, and a point of view on the world. Dust, resplendence, etymology, verb. Then redesigning the sentences with the emphasis that writing is the most refined of the technologies that concern our species, a form of jouissance, body and soul. Grant me one more minute in the body's logic. Grant me one more moment in the logic of happiness.
C'est bon.
Wow, bravo. Tellement beau. Thank you, Nicole, for your reading. I've always looked forward to your readings. There's something that, if you say that language has the capacity to vibrate, I feel that. It's like I feel it in my brain right now. I feel it. Yeah, it's just. I guess it just has a capacity to anchor us in the present, but also it's also so generative. So if, for instance, we were to begin this discussion that we've decided that we would have this evening, I think there's not really a better place to start than this idea, justement, of presence. And I believe you've written elsewhere too that writing itself is a wager of presence. And just that we could stop and spend this whole Zoom meeting and talk about that on its own, of course. But I think what I want to do is to just start us off on a much more open-ended note, because these notes of presence throughout your oeuvre have called to us and addressed Erin and Sina and I in so many different frequencies. Often I was very excited about the aspects of translation in your work, and Erin reminded us often of the intergenerational feminist knowledge transfer at work, and Sina as well. And I can even hear Sina fresh in my mind saying how, speaking of the aliveness of your work, and considering also, my mind, it's quite tentacular, like c'est très tentaculaire in my mind right now where I want to go with this. So instead I'll simplify it and just invite you then to tell us a little bit about what has been this wager of presence for you in your work. And also because I've across your oeuvre, there's a concern for being of one's time. And I think in many respects, that's one of the things that I am celebrating here, is that there is an astonishing movement throughout your oeuvre, more than 50 years of writing, and yet you constantly are so pointedly ahead of us. So I'm going to leave it at that, but I would welcome your thoughts on this wager of presence and this vibrating present that language gives us access to.
Well, I think that I won't talk about the present, political present, social present, but the present in itself, I think, is related very much to poetry, because when you write poetry, you are in the present. No matter if you work for 6 months on a poem, you are always in the present tense when you write it. And I guess as well, when you read it, you are in the present tense in a certain way. The present is a kind of space, is really a space. That is why I was so interested in the title you gave to the book, Avant Desire, because what is avant desire? We live in a culture, civilization of desire, which means that we need la durée, I don't know how you say that, the word in English, la durée, and we postpone before we get to the object of desire. So there's a kind of narrative which installed itself also. We live in a civilization where, and probably that's why we write as well, because there is a moment in the desire when the desire narrates its story and when it meets its object of desire. But l'avant desire, which is also fascinating, because what is the avant desire? It's also a space full of movement, a space where you cannot pinpoint exactly what is the desire, but that space is preparing to make a statement about the kind of desire you want, and so on. And so I was wondering, would there be possible to have a civilization of avant desire, and what it would look like, So, voilà, je vais m'arrêter ici so everyone has a chance to talk. But I wanted to say about the book that is a living creature, that book. It's not just an anthology. It's really living all the time. It lives with dialogue, it lives with dreams, it lives with imagination. You have created, definitely, a sort of creature which probably is often close to writers, but we don't, usually in books, we go page after page. Of course, we go page after page as well because it's a book, but nevertheless, we have to keep sometimes also to breathe in order to follow the proposition. And that is fantastic. It really makes the book alive. Voilà. C'est magnifique.
That's an enormous, I mean, I'm just so happy to hear you say that, and to be and to be called by the I guess the aliveness of the book. So Sina, maybe you have something also that you'd like to add to this, since many of the discussions that we had about Brossard's work being, you know, offering double, triple perspectives, came from you, and you also suggested the title, which we all went, ah. So maybe there's something that you would like to talk about there in terms of the avant désir and what it reserves for the knowledge of the future.
Well, I mean, I'd like to hear, I'm interested in hearing Nicole talk about the future for sure. I guess I could just say that it's just such an honor to be able to have sort of shuffled this book together. But, you know, there could be so many other variations on the book. I mean, that is the joy of this project, right? I mean, I was carrying around a huge a box of books, you know, in order to select and compress into this, you know, this selection, this reader. But I mean, I think that's what always draws me back to Nicole's work, is it teaches us how to be present in this moment, and particularly in a moment such as we are now, where you know, the fiction of the masculinist patriarchal world in which we live in, where we're aware that it's a fiction, you know, that the groundlessness, and that we have to be present. We have to constantly be present. We have to constantly be constructing this world. So, I mean, at its most sort of extreme, this is the lesson that I keep getting from Nicole's work, and this sort of this decision to do a joyful creation of the universe all the time, which sounds maybe esoteric, but yeah.
You're so right. I mean, this is what we kept talking about, and we kept sending one another pictures kind of our desks and joking, and sometimes, you know, joking breathlessly as we were literally trying to edit while having very real deadlines from the very fabulous, extremely generous publisher saying now. But you know, we were joking that there's more and more and more, and that the text quite literally is alive, because we would discover that in fact we hadn't covered all of the, you know, we had missed a text that just came out in Catalan 5 minutes ago. And so there's this feeling of both the aliveness, the ongoingness of your thinking, Nicole, and then for all of us in different ways, as we were talking to one another, the ways in which not only is your writing continually oxygenating the places in which we orbit together and by ourselves, but it's also, you know, a kind of a greening towards other writers. I was trying to settle my really kind of agitated heart and mind in preparation for this, and I was having trouble settling, and so I just kind of was sitting with books around me, and I had this book, which, like, I mean, can we hold it up? It's so pretty. What beautiful books Coach House makes. But I was sitting with this around me, but I also had one of the other books I had with me was Lisa Robertson's Milling. And that opens with a quotation from Stacey Doris talking about the form being constantly changing, and it changes at the speed of life, and recognizing that is poetry's lucidity of the fact of how quickly life changes. And I found myself kind of going down these avenues from your work, Nicole, to these other writers, and then back to your work. And that, to me too, is another kind of, if not avant desire, then like right in the midst of it before reaching the object.
Yeah. Yeah, being okay with the act of falling, I guess, in some senses. I wanted to actually just bring Jane Malcolm's question up, though, for you, Nicole. She's very interested in pronouns, stable and unstable, and wondering if you could talk a little bit more about a pronoun other than the absolute I. It's a great question. Is this a way of describing the unbroachable, which is, I think, what we're also talking about? The gulf between language and self, a minor I that resists mastery. She says, I'm quite intrigued by this partial plastic I.
Yes, it's funny that I mentioned the I so many times in the reading, because I don't work with the I. I'm not interested in the self. I'm interested, though, in pronouns. And I've noticed that in the years that I have been writing, that there are some moments when it's easy to write, for example, with a we or a tu, which you don't have in English, but you, but the intimate you. There are moments in life where some pronouns are absolutely unusable because you don't need them at that moment to breathe, to exist. And it's funny because for a long time, poets have kept their distance also from the I. But when you use the I in poetry, usually it has to be a very strange I. For example, I think of the poem of Saint-Denis Garneau when he says, I walk beside a joy. Well, we know it doesn't exist. Je marche à côté d'une joie. It's when the I can perform action and images and go through some incredible images that it's so interesting in poetry, in literature in general, but in poetry especially. And so, I'd say that the question, since I haven't used my I, my anecdotal I, for so many long time in my writing, then I might get curious about it. But I think that if I get curious about it, probably, again, I will be more curious about the processes, how it functions, than about what it is or what it means. I will probably more attracted to discovering its process on what space and what time, on what material it takes joy, or it can get despaired. So it will be like an inquiry, probably. But it's interesting. Pronouns, I don't think we are free of using different pronouns. There are interesting pronouns. Also, le on, le nous. I've been writing different texts since the last 2 years. And it's funny because I know that I like to work with the we, and I like to work with the neutral on in French. And I don't question myself too long on why I do that. I know if I do it, it's because that's what I need at this moment in my writing. But sometimes also you can use a pronoun and decide you will perform by using one pronoun, and then it becomes, it's still literature, but it becomes a performance in language in some way. So it's, well, that's a very interesting question. I mean, it's the main question. And if you notice, I'm not sure in English, but I know in dans la littérature in Quebec, actually, people work only with the I, because that's the only thing that we are left with, actually. You cannot even know if it's a false information. I mean, there is chaos in meaning first.
Right.
And then, so the only thing where we think there is no chaos is probably the I, or at least we'll say if there is chaos in the I, we'll get rid of that chaos. And a lot of people are working around their I, let's say.
Does that have something to do with this idea of the logic of happiness, with which you ended your reading tonight with, this beautiful logic of happiness?
Well, I think, I don't know how everyone deals with different kind of logic, but I know that I think I am profoundly happy in the sense that human beings are so complex that when you notice about that, when you take note, when you are remember of that, it produces an interior joy. And out of that joy, you get to know more about human beings and about the processes of what they are doing on Earth in different ways. Yes.
And Nicole, do you think that, because I'm thinking about the trope of remaking the world, which comes up often in your work and explicitly in the book-length essay on translation, and I'm wondering if this position of joy, of even collective buoyancy to a degree, because you've collaborated so much through the years, and you make there's an affirmation of making space, so for something larger than the anecdotal I. And so all of these affirmative spaces that you open and hold open, is that in many ways how one goes about remaking the world? Not necessarily, I don't mean it doesn't even have to be in an explicitly literal sense, but I mean in the way that language can change something in the channels of our minds, and in the way that we perceive the gap between the real and reality. So a position of joyfulness to remake the world.
We do remake the world. We do give different input in language. We as individual, but society also treats words differently depending on the century, depending on the generation, depending on the moment, depending on many acting. So we keep remaking the world, which is to know how to live together. And for people of my generation, of my culture, which is to live with justice, equality, and so on. So we keep moving, but the world also keeps moving. We have been moving in a very slow manner, in a certain way. Now, with the quantique, with the virtual, everything moves so quickly. And I remember, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 years ago already, I wrote something about just take your time now, stop running, just stop a little bit. But also, Geneviève was asking about le sujet contemporain, because yes, I want to be a contemporary subject, because I want to know what's going on around me. What does it mean? I remember when I was a very young writer, I was, one of the most scandalous word was lie. a lie was the most horrible thing, because things are being constructed on lie. We don't know the truth, but we figure out something which we might respect as truth. But lies have always been there, and we have to keep asking about why they are made. Most of the time by now, we know the answer very often. But now there are lies, there is illusion, there are so many things around us that could even destroy a certain number of certitude.
Right.
But you have vital certitude, which are related to life, to nature, to love most of the time. Of course, we have some certitude about violence, but we would like to get rid of that certitude by
Right.
violence disappearing and so on. So, and now that I'm talking about all those things, this is probably why I always end up with the word happiness, entre guillemets, because when you start thinking, or when you start even using some few sentences, already your brain gets excited, your own person gets excited, and that's what brings, what keep me alive in a certain way, to be excited by language, and to be excited by the complexity of everything. Complexity would be a key word, I would say. I don't use it so that often, but I think it would be a key word to make me enjoy life in a certain way. I don't know if I've been answering your question, but I've been doing my best.
Did you? Oh, it sounds like you've made a decision actually to have a. I mean, your work is critiquing the world around you, but it's always critiquing it in a joyful way. It's kind of undoing it in a way that's making more and making space for more people to come, and also undo more. So I'm just wondering, was that like an instinct, or just, I guess, where did that impulse come from? I mean, we know now, yeah, this younger generation is really taking on the idea of self-love and of creating joy as a kind of political response to a moment that wants us to deny that. But I mean, so in a way, maybe we're coming full circle again to this moment where women are understanding that joy is perhaps a very big political issue.
Oh, that would be wonderful, wonderful. I mean, that would be, but you are perfectly right. It's some things, well, that might be interior of yourself, but I think it is a subliminal decision about life. If you are going to be alive, you might as well be in the most interesting way, which deals with philosophy, which deals with pleasure, which deals with friendship, which deals with love. You might, if you enjoy life, do it the most interesting way, and honor what's in yourself as human being. We do not honor the best in every human being, in fact, because sometimes we don't even have time to see it, in the sense that people don't have time to show it to us, and we don't have time to look at it. So I'd say, yes, it is a kind of decision which doesn't make of you a naive person. On the contrary.
Right. Well, it's hard to be joyful in these moments, right?
Absolutely. And of course it happens, but it's a decision somehow. Or you go down, or you say, well, I think human beings are not such a stupid species that I think we can still hope of words like happiness, or play with them if needed, but not leave them there.
Right. Erin, do you have a question?
Yeah, I found myself thinking about, listening to the ways in which you're talking about happiness, Nicole, and and thinking still about, you know, what is the before of desire, and then where we started with thinking about presentness. And I think my question is about, and maybe it's a question for everyone, but really I'll turn it to Nicole first. In this moment, what place does writing have in the present? What is the context of writing in the present moment? Does that context take a particular form? Is poetry the form for now? Yeah, so I find myself thinking in very material ways about writing right now, and also really hungry for thinking about kind of yeah, thinking about how writing is changing in this current moment, or if it's happening indeed at all, which, you know, for me it's not.
Well, writing is, I was mentioning in the last paragraph that I was reading, that it's the most interesting technology about us. I mean, writing, and then literature would come later on, but simply the act of writing. So I think it's been the perfect technology which allowed us to create what they've called humanism and even feminism. Anytime you think, anytime you feel, if you are able to translate that on a piece of paper and then to show it to someone else who will understand what you have been writing, then that's the most interesting technology. Actually, that technology is taken over by a new technology, by the virtual, by l'intelligence artificielle, and so on. So I don't know what will happen of human beings. I don't think we are even talking about a change of civilization. We are probably talking about a change of species happening to us. I don't know how long it will take. Because we have been developing some of the things we have in us, but really not enough. And people are not developing all the possibilities, whether they are intellectual, spiritual, affective, sexual, whatever, but we are only developing a little piece of what we are or could be simply. So writer and happiness, we know that doesn't go very well alone normally. Huh? Most of the people write because they're not happy, because something is happening to meaning though. And that's the most interesting thing, is when something happens to meaning, either to you as an individual or to your society. So you don't know what to do anymore with the words that you were familiar with. And I think it happens when you fall in love, when you feel there's no more love, and when you have to live a death, the death of someone you love, then the meaning of the world doesn't work the same way as an individual. Now, our society is actually living a chaos of meaning, actually. And so we have to figure out something in order to keep on living and enjoying living, not only living, but enjoying the fact that we are living and sharing part of it with others, and so on. If you think of writers of the 20th century, of course they were talking about the nihilism, destruction, of course, 2 wars, so many deaths around you, no future, in fact, and so on. So we don't know what the 21st century will be in terms of writing, but people will give a chance to writing because that might be their last chance to remain sane in a certain way. So now if we talk about writing and books, if we talk about books, that's another story. There's a marketing, there's an industry, and so on. So, and even myself, sometimes I find myself very angry with some of the words which the system is offering us. For example, creativity is a word offered to us by the neoliberalism. I mean, because otherwise there is the word creation. Creativity is a tool very useful to the neoliberalism because it brings a lot of the données, what's the word in English? Information, the données, that's what there is in the computer. Anyway, I don't know the translation, but it's very useful to neoliberalism. And it doesn't cost a lot for the soul when you are very creative. It's very useful. It's finding solution. Really, to be creative is finding solution. Doesn't mean that it's creation in itself. So there's different way you can approach the reality we are living. And one thing also that of course, we never talk about in terms of politics, which is fear. Fear of see a word like democracy disappear. Some people say that it does not exist, but it does exist. It's the same thing for freedom of talk, freedom of expression. If you don't have it, then there is something lost in yourself. Yes. So whether we decide we are going to eat and there's no freedom, we are eating, but with no freedom. Knowing that you are free to say something or that you're not free to say something makes a big difference in how your mind constructs your relation to reality, and of course, therefore, to fiction, if you can have fiction.
Right.
There's something that I find really intriguing, and it's how your words circulate in reality, Nicole. So in my mind, your work, bits of it, fragments of it circulate. So you're very quotable, not in a sense that that people just take the work gratuitously and then, without any context. But I mean that in my mind, I think people recognize certain lines that from your work that are just kind of floating around as though, and they may not even be completely familiar with Nicole Brossard, your whole œuvre, and yet they might know J'ai tué le ventre, par exemple, or they might think about this morning killing history with a silent E, or they might think of something called the aerial vision, or and that I find that's very intriguing because it's working the other way around. It's of what you were suggesting earlier about how language interpolates us, and so I suppose what I'm interested in, and we're coming to a close soon, and I do want to open it up, but are you aware to the degree of your importance, both symbolic and shall I say literal? So either your role as a mentor or the degree to which, yes, your work has reached and touched so many readers who continue to read and to reread, et qui délirent de votre œuvre.
Well, it's easier to say, I don't know, because if I say, yes, I know, then it calls for another responsibility. And if there is a responsibility, then there is a loss of also of freedom in time and space, in your thinking, and so on. So it all goes together. And that's why I did not say it, but when I received the book, I was so moved, I could only even look at it a little bit and open it. And it took at least 2 weeks before I could get it into the book and see what creator was alive and so on. Because I was moved, what was the emotion? I did not go deeper to find out the answer, but and still it is there. But the only thing that came out of the book for me was that it was something alive, and you need as well to be alive to move and play with it and move in dialogue, in poetry and prose, in essay and philosophy and so on. And in that sense, it resembles also the way my favorite trio works and are. because you question a lot and you answer brilliantly to the question that you are raising as well in your reading.
I have a question here from somebody in the audience, Lida. Dear Nicole, I remember in a conversation you had with Lee Miracle 2 years ago in Blue Metropolis. You said your writing changes, the pace of it, the form, even the content, the way you're breathing, not metaphorically, but in its true physical materiality changes. You said your writing has become more round because your breathing has become more round. She hopes she's not misquoting. Do you mind speaking a little bit more about that?
Well, I think it's true. I mentioned that there were some poems of 1970 or something like that that are very difficult for me to read because I cannot breathe in them. They are they have a certain logic, they have a certain shape, which is not fully alive, which is not round, which is not spiraling or fully alive. And I think that time going by that my writing has changed. It's not as square, if I can say that, as it was. C'est beaucoup plus arrondi, and it's rounded because of the emotion getting into the language, getting differently, or getting with experience into the language. Yes, absolutely, yes. I don't know, because I know that I have two calligraphy at the same time. One where I write, it's very vertical line, and one which is the writing of the schoolgirl with the religious teachers and so on. So yeah, there are two writing and probably two characters, one which likes to be excited and things go fast and sharp, and the other one which is thinking and more fluid and so on. So yes, it's part of the writing, and it's okay. It's okay. The interesting is that I use the one which is the truest to what I am. Yes.
There's another question, and this person would like you to speak a little bit about the relationship of hope to happiness, or happiness and hope in your writing.
Well, I think that those two words will be there all the time, whether they will be working in the writing or whether they will flash in the writing, but they will be there. Only because when I write, and especially if I can write for a month or 2 months every day, very faithfully, and getting into what I'm writing, it brings me happiness, happiness because I have the impression of living with everything that I am, as they say, body and soul and energy and so on. So I was thinking about that because I remember finishing a text and the joy that I had in being, reading, writing, reading, rereading, translating sometimes, and so on, researching. It all goes together, and it gives me a sense of being full of that matter which is qui se partage, which you can exchange with others, not exchange, but share with others, and so on. Yes. But first, at your table of work, yes.
Wow. Wow. Nicole. I'd like to know what you have for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, because you're just so so generous, and just you're always so on. And I am looking at the time, and I don't know how Zoom works. I imagine everyone won't be cut off at 9, just poof, and we'll all disappear into a cloud. But I did want to take this opportunity to kind of ground us all together, to thank you for thinking and to bringing all these for bringing us along these angles of vision, which are always multiple and multiply inspiring, and this turning us on to new habits, I think, in the best possible sense. And I also would like to thank you all for being with us here in this space on this Friday evening. And I would like to thank from the bottom of my heart, my soul, the translators and collaborators, contributors, because this is, après tout, a book that comes to you from the angle of translate, the very wide angles and multiple angles of translation and everything that can mean. So as you can see, this work wouldn't be possible, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say, without these translators. So thank you. And merci encore, Nicole. Et merci Coach House et mes collaboratrices. Et merci à vous d'être là ce soir. J'espère que vous retournerez dans vos vies avec ces mots, avec ces pensées et avec un livre peut-être aussi. Non, c'est juste une blague. OK, bonne soirée. Erin, would you like to add anything? Sina?
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you. Yeah. Congratulations to, I feel like congratulations to everyone for taking the time to spend together tonight with Nicole's work and all of the ways, as Geneviève so articulately said, that it's an invitation for so many of us to meet in all of these different ways. Thank you for writing us into being together, Nicole.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this book. Thank you, Coach House, for the beautiful book that you have done. Et merci aux auditeurs et auditrices. Thank you so much.
Here's to the future.
Oui.
Let's write it our way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.